like 5.6 cyber model, I mean, it's insane. I have let it run for a day, like on its own, and it just casually popped this phone. It was like, oh, there's 4 CVEs, but yeah, fuck the end days. Like, I just came up with my own 0 day for like, it got local admin and starting to pull like these protected sections, and I'm like, all right, man, like let me know when you're finished. I guess I'll come check in on it some other time. Every once in a while,
Costin,
it's just like, yo, can you replug the USB? I'm like, sorry, yeah, you got it.
Costin, this is what happens when you become a fellow. You kind of just go off into vulnerability
The
research
fellow
and
life.
all-day bug discovery.
It's the
Must be
fellowship
nice.
of the tokens.
I don't know why
Fellowship of
people
life.
used to say this vulnerability research shit was so hard, man. I'm just sitting here, I prompt it every few hours, and just me and marked out, right? Like right up there.
Here we are. Hello, everyone. This is the Three Buddy Problem. I'm up to episode 109 with my buddies Juan Andres and Costin, checking in from Bucharest after another vacation. Costin, why are we late
Yes,
this week?
why is it so surprising? I mean, it's summer after all.
Is it?
Summer vacations. Quickly, this episode of the podcast is presented by our friends over at State of Statecraft, the conference that happens in October 22nd in Brussels in Belgium. State of Statecraft is one of those smaller conferences that we love, exclusively featuring discussions on state-sponsored threats and hybrid operations. This is a special message for Three Body Problem listeners. The folks are really, really keen on getting your submissions in for the conference. The CFP officially closed this weekend, but if you include the phrase Three Body Problem, you can have a late submission considered. We're big fans of State of Statecraft, stateofstatecraft/CFP. Get those CFPs in quickly. Get out to Brussels, one of those small LabsCon type conferences that we love. Juanito, have you been to one before?
I haven't. I really wanted to go, but I was already committed to a couple of events last year, I think in the UK. So I couldn't make it. I think Costin, were you able to make it last time?
It was around the same time as Countermeasure when we all three were in
right.
Ottawa, actually.
That's what it was. Yeah.
I also
I'd love to
noticed,
go this
Costin,
year.
that TLP Black is sponsoring State of Statecraft, so you're a fan of this conference. Can you talk a little bit about what the expectation is there?
We are a fan of the conference. We are also a fan of Mike, who's organizing. He's putting the conference together. This is the second edition of this event. We love the fact that it's in Brussels, the capital of the European Union and all that. So it's not only you guys in the Americas who have your cool conferences. We also have one in Europe for Europe people, but also, of course, we welcome everyone. And the expectations are, of course, TLP Red level talks, TLP Black level talks, information on new threat actors, including, cases that people analyze, things that have never been discussed in the public and so on. So let's see.
Best of luck to State of Statecraft sponsoring the Three Body Problem for the first time. We endorse your submission to this conference, and even if you get a submission in, you should try and get a ticket as well. I believe it's invite only, right? One of those kind of vetted conferences where it's invite only. So shout out to those guys. Can we get to the show quickly before we run out of time? The big story this week that kind of threw everyone off was the White House issuing a memo alongside this kind of letters of marque discussion we've been having for I want to say we've discussed this on about 5 or 6 episodes, right? The idea is that the NCC has been tasked with creating, managing, and maintaining a program to authorize participating companies, these are private sector companies, to conduct cyber surveillance operations and cyber effects operations against foreign cyber-enabled transnational criminal organizations. Now, that's a lot of legalese and a mouthful. The entire program will be under the control and oversight of the federal government, will be overseen by 2 executive directors, one from Department of Justice and one from the Department of Homeland Security. So the idea is that private companies can participate in cyber surveillance operations and cyber effects operations. I want to start right there, Juan. How do you separate those two? What do those two things mean?
Well, I guess in many ways for the US government, maybe it's a little easier to separate that along the lines of authorities, but usually you would, it's the same, to some extent, it's the same way that we would start to separate things along, our espionage versus effects type ops. But I'm not entirely certain how they're structuring this. And to be fair, I'm not entirely sure they're entirely certain how they're structuring this, right? Like if not knocking them in any way, but if you look at how this is being put forth right now, the idea is that there's like a 60-day period for folks to, within the government to essentially say, like, this is what the operating procedures are going to be. And I find that more interesting than any other part of this because, as you say, right, we've been having this conversation for ages. And frankly, it's not the first time that stuff like this is going to happen, as I understand, but it's the first time that it's being discussed in this way quite so openly, and more importantly, with like a relevant set of targets to some degree. But the time factor, the time boxing of this is what makes it interesting to me because I feel like that's also the gov kind of saying, hey, we want this and like we want it now. We don't want it like eventually. We don't want it 6 months from now. We don't want it 2 years from now. Like enough dilly-dallying. Like how the fuck do we make this happen? So it's going to be interesting to see it get concrete. But I mean, your guess is as good as mine.
The headlines are U.S. government allowing private companies to hack back. Is that what we're talking about here?
I don't know about hacking back. Hacking back is a weird fucking narrative. It's always been a weird narrative. We discussed it before, but to me it was always strange because, it kind of plays into this cartoon narrative of like, oh, we got hacked and somehow we are going to enact this like sense of vengeance and put together a posse and like go get our stuff back, right? Like we know that none of that shit works and none of that is what's being discussed here. Instead, this is more relevant, I think, to the discussions we were having around like cyber militia stuff coming out of China, for example, where there's like a support element that comes along with the private sector being involved in these operations, or more importantly, in the words of a very wise friend of mine, like to what extent are we essentially enabling the soup to nuts version of this thing, right? Like of saying, you, Ryan, run a small defense contractor that we have essentially blessed to do a thing. We tell you, Ryan, that we want this effect. We want this outcome. We want you to degrade the let's make some bullshit up. The electrical systems in Iran.
Let's put it into some like actual things that has happened. Are we talking about things like Lumen and Google and DCC and those guys doing disruptions, botnet takedowns and that kind of thing? Are we talking about that? Are we talking about more specific kind of targeted, let's go after these cyber criminals and do XYZ?
I'm not entirely certain, but I think that it's not the former. It's not the things we've been seeing, even though I think that's where the discussion goes because that's what we're comfortable with in the cyber security side of things. Whereas in many ways, this is very intelligence community / military / law enforcement adjacent, where the effects and the things you're looking for are not usually
takedowns.
It's not takedown. Like, takedowns are cute. Like, that's a part of it. But we could have been doing takedowns this whole fucking time if infrastructure providers just wanted to play ball. So what we're talking about here is like, hey, we went and hacked all of these, like this server that hosts the chats for this ransomware gang and spent 2 months profiling all these assholes. We're on their boxes. We know who they are. This is their address, their name, their picture. And this is the day that they go out to like visit their moms. Like, go pick them up, go kill them. Right. Like that's a targeting package. Right. So it's a very different thing. Whereas like, I think a lot of us have been.
Do you think that's what the White House is hoping for?
I think so. I can't speak for them, but look at how much of the language around this is essentially expanding the scope of things to transnational cyber criminal, or like to transnational organizations, period, right? Like in that we can fit cyber criminals, but you can also fit, folks in the fentanyl trade. You can fit, all kinds of different sort of criminal elements that you then go, hey, it's now fair game for you, blessed company, to go, break the law a little bit, go do a couple of things you might not otherwise do. And I mean, I don't know, the standards around this are really interesting in that, like, we are touchy about them, but in a world where we didn't let the CFAA define how we think of hacking, I think, the hackers of the late 90s would be pretty comfortable, is my feel, with like 60% of what's going to happen under this, if not 80% of what's going to happen under this. Because I will be really surprised if anybody has the stomach to look at a private sector company and say, hey, go shut off the power in Venezuela, which is an effect, right? Like that's like you're going to take a fucking action. I doubt we'll ever see something quite like that, but I'm sure that if they have the stomach for any of it, it's going to be, hey, go hack all these ransomware operators and tell us where they are, right?
Costin, when we came out of RSA earlier this year, Google, Sandra Joyce had this big announcement that Google was setting up this offensive cyber unit. Do you think they were prepping for this memo? And give me your read from your perch when you saw this. Did this surprise you at all?
Well, we know for sure that some company got a heads up that this was coming, so that's why they started preparing actually a long time ago. That's one thing. The other thing that I know for certain is that actually companies have been asking for something like this for a very long time. Why? Because they private companies, absolutely private companies who actually had the means to do a lot of these things. However, they were a bit worried about the legal framework. So I'll give you like a few examples that I am personally aware of. In one case, company studying a ransomware gang, they find a way to get access to that ransomware group's command and control servers, delete the data that belonged to the victims they were helping, and get the decryption keys and decrypt all the victim data. As well as perhaps release even a decryptor. However, they didn't want to do it because it was kind of murky from a legal point of view. Like how legal is that? Even if, let's say, the CNC is in Russia and like it's all Russian cyber criminals and so on, still they didn't want to do it because they weren't fully solid on the legal side of things. So these are kind of, let's say, stories awaiting, like on the processing belt, awaiting kind of approval from law enforcement, like just waiting for the go to happen, hack into the ransomware group CNC, get the keys out, delete all the victim data that's being held for ransom, and essentially degrade that ransomware's group capabilities without hopefully leaking the 0 days they actually used for that purpose. The another case that I know actually it's being given as an example, like as a positive story, would be shutting down different botnets, multiple botnets actually, that have been around for a very long time that can actually be hacked into and, brought down essentially, like totally wiped, including, let's say, getting access to the operator's machine and wiping that as well, like deleting pretty much everything, making the internet in a way safer. So it's all, again, cyber criminal related. There's no discussions anywhere of nation state sponsored. That's why I think this language of transnational cyber criminal organizations is very important, because it kind of suggests that there's like multiple groups involved in that operation. It's not just one nation state. So that's on one hand. I know a lot of good people who are just waiting for this framework to drop in order to do good things. On the other hand, I see that a lot of our friends actually think that this is a very, very bad idea, and I think we should mention that as well on the pod. Our good friend Ivan Kwiatkowski put out a blog, I think, over the weekend, in which he advocates that this is shaky from many points of view, will ruin kind of the trust in the companies. It's the old argument that, we are on the defense. We never create viruses. We never do any offensive work, which, to be honest, I think that's a ship that has long sailed. So it's no longer the case. In reality, everyone is doing all these offensive things anyways. So
what do you define as offensive things
arguments
here? Because I want to be very clear when you say everyone is doing offensive things. I want to be quite clear with what you're talking about.
My definition of offensive things is probably quite different from other people's definition of offensive things. Because when you go after, let's say, someone who installed your EDR product and you start harvesting or deploying kernel mode implants into their systems, in my opinion, that's offensive. Anything that leverages capabilities of your tools and, let's say, creates situations where you're specifically targeting someone who is using your products on one hand to extract information from their systems for the purpose of understanding better what they do against you or other people, I think that's on the offensive side with me. So my threshold is a bit different from other people's definitions as to what offensive means. But nevertheless, there's a lot of discussion out there. I think on both sides, there's arguments on both sides. This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. Me personally, I tend to lean more towards that there are good things coming out of this. I think that there's been a lot of cases in the past where people were doing such offensive work and publishing it on X or Telegram or whatever, and everyone was like rejoicing whenever that was happening, whenever these leaks appeared out of nowhere about Chinese group or cyber criminal groups, Logbit. We've seen that in the past. Everyone was kind of rejoicing, and you have to understand where that information was coming from. So in my opinion, this is potentially interesting. So I'm more like a bit tilted towards this is possibly good. Possibly good.
I want to note here that it's not necessarily promoting a free-for-all. There's like these two executive directors must personally review and give written approval for every individual one. I think the vendors themselves that want to participate may have to post a $1 million
bounty.
Right? So there's a lot of like guardrails. I can see immediate guardrails, using that word loosely here, but guardrails around the program. Juan, does this... what is your own personal opinion on this? And does it feel comfortable to you?
I think the conversation we are having around what this is and the reality of what this is are two very different things. I think that we are looking at this with the eyes of like these doe-eyed cybersecurity folk / hacker fam / DEF CON people hanging out who, to some degree, should be excited at the prospect of somebody kind of making things a little more sane again, right? Like the CFAA and sort of the overzealousness with which hacking has been kind of all cast into the same bucket, and the line in the sand has been drawn so close, so kindergarten level, has made it so that we often miss really obvious, really simple opportunities for better intelligence collection, for disrupting things, right? Like, how many times have we looked at a dumbass op that's causing real problems, and we have the creds? We know which one the main server is. We know where the stuff is being stored. And you sit there and you go, in any universe that makes sense, I would go in there and RMRF / this shit and walk out, and it was a good day. No babies died, right? Like, it was just a good day. But all of that is in the bucket of unacceptable breaking the law in the US. So in some ways, I feel like that's what we yearn for, and that's what we're hoping will happen. But I remind people that this is government artifice. And in this case, even the bond itself is showing you what the table stakes are. This is not going to be giving a letter of marque to one of our friends or even to most of the companies that we think of, or the companies that we could start to do this, for the most part, this is almost certainly going to start with the mega behemoth defense contractors, right? Like the people who are already ready to contract with the gov. Because like something that's missing in here is, what are the contracting vehicles for doing this, right? Like we're having conversations about whether this erodes trust in cybersecurity companies. Bro, cybersecurity companies, for the most part, like we think FedRAMP High is such a difficult thing to get, because it is. But like, that's nothing compared to the kind of contracting nightmares that you usually go through to work with the US government, with the DoD and all these places. And usually, most of that contracting is carried out through existing vehicles, even when it's financially disadvantageous, because it'll take so much less time that, I mean, honestly, the viability of what you're trying to do might be entirely based on whether you can get through that contracting or not. So you end up trying to be a subprime, or you try to work through a different vehicle. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is not breaking down the barriers, at least not so far, that are logistically keeping any of the real shops we're thinking of from being a part of this. Instead, what we're talking about is a broadening of authorities and like being able to hand stuff down and being able to include more folks. Like maybe you can finally call your buddies at Anduril and be like, yo, Anduril, if you're ready to take on a cyber mission, right? Like here's your first contract, here's your whatever. And for Anduril, it's nothing to put a $1 million bond down and to file all the paperwork they need to file and then go do some cool shit. So it's a move in I want to say it's a move in the right direction. I know people have like a lot of trepidation, and I'm with them. I'm completely with them, because I think this will almost certainly be used for things that aren't the things we are thinking of, and probably will not be used for the things we're thinking of. That's my guess. But I would like anything that starts to shake up how this country thinks about hacking, because it's just so archaic that I think it's choking the talent pipeline, it's choking innovation, it's choking a lot of shit out here. It's letting a lot of damage just passively occur for no good reason.
There's an element here where the companies, private sector companies, are partly responsible for sourcing their own targets. In some cases, they can also strike like commercial deals with some threat intel partners and then pitch an operation to this NCC to say, hey, like Costin said, hey, I have access to this box. It has all these decryption keys sitting there. Let me go. Like, give me a letter. Let me go. Like, that's what we're hoping to get out of it. I'm just curious. There's been some reporting in the past, and we've seen it, especially in the DPRK operations, where there's a nation-state component of ransomware operations, for instance. Like, how do you clearly separate those two things? Are DPRK doing crypto theft? Is that a cyber-enabled transnational operation, or is that a nation-state operation? And how do you, is there like murky waters there?
I mean, I think we've been using, sorry, go ahead, Costin.
No, I was thinking that probably the main idea behind this, and well, based on what we know so far, I think the main idea is first to create a framework that allows a number of pending cases to execute. And those pending cases include mainly Russian ransomware related activities and botnets. I guess cryptocurrency could be next. I think the success of these initial cases, I think, would be very, very important in order to allow for the expansion of this framework. So we'll have to watch, for announcements on the success of and the first positive effects of these initiatives. I'm curious if the names of the companies who actually executed those contracts will be made public, if they will say who hacked into Logbit, who hacked into Chilin, and so on, and who
like
took
this
down
is how
those
you get
botnets.
into trouble when you travel somewhere, right? Like, this is
Oh,
the other thing. Is like, do private sector
sure.
guys want to get involved in this stuff at a time when they clap back? I don't know.
On the other hand, all the people that were doing these kind of things already, according to my knowledge, they were not traveling to Russia, they were not traveling to China, and they were not traveling to any of these, let's say, Chinese and Russian friendly countries anyways, for security reasons. Actually, I know some of these folks were never traveling outside the US at all. They were just, for safety reasons, staying within the US, Canada, maybe Mexico, every now and then, but that's it. For safety reasons, best not to risk it or anything.
I think there's some carve-outs on making sure it's all against foreign-based targets. There's some carve-out that if a company accidentally hits a U.S. portion as part of this, it must stop, minimize procedures, notify immediately. Any activity touching U.S. portions requires DOJ review and prior authorization. Is there a privacy component to this, a privacy rights conversation that could emerge out of this one? Are you expecting? Give me your kind of big takeaway. Are you a big fan of seeing this kind of memo? Like, where's your head?
And will you guys be doing this? Direct question.
No way. No fucking way. But frankly, look, I don't think that conversation even needs to get to the cybersecurity companies. I really don't think this is aimed at us. Like, I think we're looking at this with those eyes because that's who we are and that's what we're used to talking about. And in some cases, we are very adjacent to things like this. But, even to your point about like the threat intel partnership, right? I mean, I'd be perfectly comfortable going to whatever law enforcement body, government office is going to coordinate this and say, hey, I'm happy. I have here these things that someone could use to do some good. I don't know why you would want me to do it. I don't know. I don't fucking know how to do this the best way. I just happen to have the right information. Go fucking give a contract to whatever random shop you like and let them do it, right? Like, and I think the big issue here is look at how obtuse our government is, that this needs to be discussed now in 2026. We need to have this conversation because I couldn't really go and say, hey, FBI, here's these creds. It will help everyone on Earth if you just go in there and clicky-clack a few things and just, take this shit down tomorrow. Everyone will be happier. And we just know that's not going to happen. Even though that's a sworn officer and this is verified information and this is a public good thing and it will for sure help people, not just in the US and other places, you know for a fact that will not happen. I'm more likely to win the fucking lottery tomorrow than it is for that to happen. But that obviously makes no fucking sense, right? So like, am I excited? I don't know. I'm excited in the way that like seeing movement in something that is completely intransigent is exciting. But do I think it's going to be immediately for the better? I don't know. I probably not.
Let me flip the question to Costin. Let's say TLP Black is a US-based private sector company with some kind of capabilities of like going and getting keys and stuff that you described. Would you participate in it?
Well, first of all, we don't have $1 million. Two, we're not an American company. Three, we don't have the expertise to do offensive research. Let's say if someone wanted to invest into something like an idea of this sort, I personally think it would be best to start a new company from scratch that specializes into something like that with the best minds in the offensive industry. And
then do threat intel partnerships and get data from a variety of sources.
Of course, they can do some kind of threat intel partnerships. I think they may not even need. I mean, we're truly living through special times when if you combine things like Operation Daybreak, Red Access with Anthropic, Mythos. But by the way, I was in Greece and I was like drinking a lot of. I finally secured access to Mythos beer, that is. And I was like every time, and the Mythos, and they were correcting me every single time. They're saying Mythos, and I was like Mythos, no, Mythos. So if you secure access to Mythos and Daybreak,
talk about good marketing. I've not seen Costin I've maybe seen Costin drink 4 times in my life, and it's like he's like sipping a little bit of wine, and then
my man is pounding Mythos beer.
Yeah, but like we've gotten so many pictures of him holding these Mythos beers over the past few days.
Mythos access secured.
I don't want you to lose the train of thought, because I think where you're going, like the capabilities of combining models and so on, you don't even need to go by.
Yeah, we're living in such amazing special times, and I think that this is not gonna last forever. Like this is gonna last maybe for 1 year, a year and a half, something like that, when you can actually leverage all these capabilities like GLM 5.3, Kimi Case 3, even these fancy Western expensive things that require approval, like all together, you can leverage all these things, build, like you were saying, build 0 days, put together 0 days. You don't even need end days, because you can like regenerate 0 days from scratch and go after these command and control servers, ransomware groups, extract the keys, help the victims, stop them from paying the ransom. Even like if you can find some methods, just imagine that instead of paying the ransom, you find the vulnerability that you can actually exploit through the blockchain. You can compromise the threat actor, and you can just grab all their coins, just grab and return all those money to the victims together with the decryption keys. I don't think there's anyone on the planet who will say that's a bad idea, if you ask me. And we just talked like about the case where it looks like the NSA actually did that with Chinese cyber criminal and just lifted all their bitcoins. Confiscated, obviously, redistributing them to the victims, in my opinion, is even better. But nevertheless, we can settle for what is available. So I don't think anyone would say that is bad.
I think.
Do you think Costin is onto something, Juan, that we're going to see like a startup or two just get created just to do this?
Yeah, no, I mean, Costin's completely right on the startup part of it, because that's just the way these things work, period. Even if you have a company, you're going to make another company just to do this part. And then, to be fair, guys, like, I think, Costin, you said something really important. No one on the planet is going to think that's a bad idea. And that's where I'd like to correct you, that there is a fuck ton of bureaucrats in the 20-mile vicinity around where I am right now who disagree with that. And it's entirely an authorities play, and it's like there is this notion in USG, particularly with the people who currently have the authorities to do these things, that the world is being kept from chaos just by the fact that authorities are only in the hands of these 4 places, and the only way to keep the world from ending is to make sure that that's the only way these things work. And on some level, maybe they're right. On another level, I think they're completely wrong. Does that mean this is the way to do it? I don't know, because no way seems to be readily available or accessible or manageable. Like, I don't know why we just can't have normal conversations about these things. But I just keep coming back to this notion of like, I know what some of the things these things have been used for before, and the kinds of things some of these things have been used for before. And I don't know that this is the right solution for the things we want, because it would require a certain agility that I don't know that we're seeing. Right, so let's roll this back just a little bit, not to linger on this topic for too long, but like let's just walk through a scenario. TLP Black has information about how a ransomware operation is being carried out right now. Maybe they hit like critical infrastructure. It's like a really bad situation, right? Because of the reversing and the magic and all this other stuff, Costin knows where the main servers are, where the keys and wallets are being held, where we could probably get the money back and stop this operation. That's a today thing. That's a like yesterday thing, right? As far as I'm reading this, it's not like we now have Ryan now has a company that has been blessed, it's paid the bond, and it's now like the FBI Arizona office's preferred, cyber contractor that, you go, Ryan, and maybe
Sounds
you
like a
call...
good idea.
You call your handler in the FBI and you go, hey, bro, we got this thing. We're ready to go. We're going to do this tonight. Unless you have any objections, call me in the next 2 hours and we're good. Click. And then by that night, Ryan and his boys go in there and, they get all the money back and the ransomware infrastructure is taken down and everyone's machines are unlocked and the credits cut and it's like a happily ever after. And we assume that Ryan's contract gets paid out someday. That's not what's being described by any stretch of the imagination, right? Where the order flow comes from, when the relationship is established, how the contracting is determined, how the thing is going to be paid for, is there budget for it? There's only so much work that you can do for the US government on a voluntary fashion, that they can accept before that's problematic. Right? There's a lot of rules and stuff that goes into this shit. And frankly, with $1 million bond and a whole lot of liability in place, it's not like you're going to be picking your own missions, right? You're not going to go do your own thing and then you'll square out the balance with the US government, right? So I think that kind of removes a whole chunk of use cases that we're thinking about. Right? You basically need this to be scenarios that can wait probably 4 to 6 months in the best of cases before this happens. Or somebody in USG came down with an emergency thing. So it's originating from inside and they're coming in for some fucking reason. They've decided that they can't do it themselves or the FBI can't do it, whatever. And then all of a sudden they go and let some people, they grab a couple companies and do whatever. All I'm saying is this is, what the things we're picturing and the things that are about to happen are 2 fucking miles away from each other.
And nobody knows for sure. I mean, we got this memo and everyone is there's 2 sides to the coin and everyone is trying to figure it out. So thoughts and prayers to everyone trying to figure that out. I want to pivot to some threat intel reports, kind of go back to our roots. Costin, one specific one that caught my attention is something from Gen Digital. Gen Digital, our friends at the Angry Spark Discovery, published a report on a custom Windows backdoor that they found on a single corporate workstation while hunting for unusual WMI persistence. Malware was small, had a limited set and disguised itself as legitimate Realtek software. Whenever we hear of a piece of malware found on a single solitary machine, your eyebrows raise. You talk a little bit about in the past how AI can now be used and some of these models and tools can now be used to pick apart these reports in ways like advanced research, like taking a Gen Digital paper and advancing it somewhere else. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw here? Why is this interesting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it, by the way, was originally recommended by a listener of the podcast who wrote you directly, right? David. I think it was
Correct.
David.
Shout out to David on LinkedIn who passed this along to us so that we discuss it.
But for sure, this is another Angry Spark, if you ask me. I do not think it's the same threat actor. I think it's a different threat actor here. But I'll refrain from the attribution game. However, it's another very interesting story. It's another very interesting story for sure, because on one hand, I think that you can distinguish top research out there in case of companies by their ability to find the needle in the haystack. And I think this is the second case of this kind of big needle in a haystack that we see from the awesome guys at Gen. Obviously, other companies can also find the needle in the haystack, but in particular, these two are, in my opinion, kind of special and different from the typical needle in the haystack that you see nowadays. Nowadays, most of these you see some Russian cyber operation or Chinese or Iranian, right? It's unusual that you see things that have a certain kind of, touch to them, which doesn't look Russian, doesn't look Chinese, doesn't look whatever. They seem to be of a different sort. Now, what attracts the attention here is this tiny backdoor that starts from WMI, that appears to be very, very, let's say, fine-tuned for quality. It's a quality piece of technology, very small, very efficient, very neatly written. Whoever wrote this, they knew what they were doing. It's the same kind of, feeling that you get when you read their blog about Angry Spark. And to be honest, what I like a lot about this blog in particular, it's not an automated machine analysis of that backdoor that we see very often nowadays. With AI nowadays, anyone can be a threat intelligence expert. Anyone can do reverse engineering. How can I tell? Because we should talk about the fact that Anthropic announced that they will watermark every single piece of text they produce from now on in order to comply with this European Union regulations. You are welcome from Europe.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Not that this was already happening pretty much for everyone. And was it Demis Hassabis from Google who published, I think, a reference paper on how to watermark AI-produced text a couple of years ago, which kind of became the standard in this field. But how can I tell is that I recognize the train of thinking and train of thoughts that goes into the researcher's mind when they look at this, and like the order. What the AI does very well, it will write a report in the perfect order, and it will start with this. A researcher looking at the malware, he'll, let's say, start looking at the malware and then hit kind of certain guardrails, if you want to call them like that, or problems that they don't know how to immediately. The purpose of these things is not available. So you will say, okay, I'm going to look at this later. So as you read through the text, you understand that the researcher first describes what is available and then goes back and revisits some of those topics, which the AI will never do, because the AI will solve everything from starts. So in particular, there's one cool thing here, which is that the malware leverages CRC32 polynomial, this very famous EBCD 380 polynomial, and it doesn't store that constant in the binary directly. And initially they postulate that this is because they don't want the binary fingerprinted, through heuristics. And we remember the old story with the RC5, RC6 constants that were giving away equation code. And immediately you come to the conclusion that perhaps this is because they don't want the code fingerprinted. But later they just reanalyze this part in the blog, and they actually prove that it comes from a very specific library that was most likely coded around 2006, if I remember correctly. That's the last time that they were using this particular technique. So that means that this malware was built on top of some really, really old ancient code and libraries, kind of suggesting a lineage that goes back, into the golden age of malware. That's why I personally think that this is possibly one of those interesting artifacts that can be traced back into the golden age of malware.
If your supposition is correct, I want to just kind of flag for the audience a little bit of fact check. Gen Digital is the parent company that owns Avast. So the threat intel team here might be the old Avast folks. It's also kind of like a conglomeration of what used to be Norton LifeLock and the Symantec consumer arm. I bring all of that up to say this is a Western operation appearing to out.
That's your assumption.
Right. I'm making it. Nobody fact checks anyone here. Right. Does that stand out to you at all that Gen Digital did 2 of these in a row? Because it goes against the grain of what we've been talking about.
What I find interesting is that the blog doesn't actually say where the victims was located. So typically from that point alone, you can say what this is. Like in my experience, If you look at the victim, you should be able to say with a higher degree of confidence who is behind this operation. Forgetting, let's say, just leaving aside all the technical details and all this big care for not getting exposed or not getting signed or signatured on. And if we look at the victim alone, I think that would be very revealing. But unfortunately, they don't say where the victims was located. Now, typically, everybody says where the victims is located, unless you don't want to say that. There is for sure. It's a problem. No, there is a problem. There's always a problem.
Or you don't
when there's
know.
only one victim. Whenever there is only one victim, that's a big problem. Because like if there's, 50 victims, then you can say we saw victims in several countries, including Cuba and Venezuela. And that also is pretty telling, in my opinion. Or if you say like, yeah, all the victims are in Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, and Iran, that's also pretty revealing. But when you have just one victim, I think that's a tricky issue. So you cannot.
Is it possible they
say
don't know?
who it was.
Because Juanito says maybe they don't know.
I doubt that. Like nowadays, not to know where the victim is located, I think that can only happen if they always maybe use some kind of a VPN or connected by a VPN of sorts, and they use the free product. But I would say that is rare nowadays, and even if they do that, you can sometimes still infer things about the victim. If you ask me, what makes this story special is it does appear that this is something like a blast from the past, right? So the CNC was registered in 2020, it expired in 2021, and it's still unregistered at the time of filming of our podcast. Even I didn't have time, or I was waiting if there's any value into sinkholing the command and control server of this, just to see if there's any victims. Through a bit of pivoting, I found a few other command and control servers that appear related to this.
That was not included in the Gen paper.
They were not included, yeah. Separate from the Gen podcast. Unlike the previous case with Angry Spark, it's easier now to pivot and find more stuff on the infrastructure side of things.
Do you mind talking about how that happens? Like when you say I pivoted, what does that mean?
So what it means is you take the command and control server from the Gen blog, this diaggertrack.com domain, and then what I do personally, I try to pivot on several things. One is passive DNS. So through passive DNS, using our passive DNS database that just combines open source intelligence, like lists of registered domains, things like that, you can immediately find a few others that were hosted on the same head/snare IP address. And actually around the same time frame, 2020, 2021. There's a bunch of .ru Russian domains also, which they look a bit suspicious in my opinion. I've seen this only with this kind of Russian cybercriminal Andromeda style smoke loader things in the past. So that is a bit suspicious, the overlap in my opinion with the .ru domains. I think the other domain that I saw there was something like Netflix themed. This is DiaggerTrack, is obviously impersonating Microsoft Diagnostics Tracker Daemon or whatever. So the Netflix one is also a bit like weird, but nevertheless, like the time frame and the overlap makes me think is related. And you can find a few others also through passive DNS pivoting, but also through looking at registration patterns. So how you do that, you look for other domains registered around the same time through the same registrar, having the same name servers, and sometimes even like moving in similar patterns over time. So that means like hopping through different registrars or IP addresses over time at the same moment. That also gives them away. So if you apply these, you can come up with a few more. However, they don't lead to any known samples. At least in my case, I haven't been able to catch any other samples related to these other domains. And also, that sample, the original one, is not on VirusTotal. And you can derive Yara rules from the screenshots, which is this art that Mr. Miniev and others have developed from back in the days, which is to write Yara rules based on screenshots, which you can totally do in this case. Those Yara rules also don't bring anything. One thing I didn't have time to do is to run them on my paleontology collections. However, I think that even if I do that, they won't come up with anything, just simply because this looks like a very, very rare artifact. So it's unlikely it'll catch anything.
I'd be very curious for the people who have good net flow in broad places to look at the C2s, assuming that there's anything left that's still active, and see if there's more than one victim per IP or domain, right? Like, you're telling me that this is an extremely rare piece of malware. If you're following that through and you have not overly siloed your operational pipeline, then I would expect that the single implant for the single place is being ran by a single piece of infra. And in that, I'd be very curious. But yeah, I mean, the time window doesn't help. Go.
I got another question for Costin. You usually talk a bit when you're talking about your threat hunting, and when Greg was on the show, he talked about listening, and he's always getting game from you. What's the smell test tell you here? Have you seen characteristics of this before? Does this give you a spidey sense that, yeah, I saw a real tech thing here, or I saw this technique here, or I saw anything there that gives you a little bit more along the lines of attribution?
Like, one thing, by the way, that after looking at a lot of things for a very long period of time, everything starts to look similar to something. So whenever you look at that, you'll immediately say, oh, this reminds me of that. So honestly, yes, this reminds me of something, but I don't know if it's actually related or not. What I think that we can say with a higher confidence is what else was hosted in the same IP range at this command and control server. So I know there's a bunch of Cloud Atlas in the same IP range. There was also a bunch of Wellmess, if you remember Wellmess, this APT29 framework. There was also like this Mata framework or Mata malware used by allegedly North Korea, also in the same IP range, together with a bit of APT31 and a bit of unattributed Cobble strikes. So unfortunately, there's not just one single thing in that range. What I noticed, by the way, is that nowadays the most interesting things are typically alone by themselves in an IP range. Why? Because command and control server or registration teams or operators or infrastructure operators, they are getting more and more careful about hosting their stuff in the same range as other cyber criminal or APT groups IP ranges, because the moment that you put your VPS or you get like a Bitcoin VPS in the same range as Lazarus, Sophos, APT29, the probabilities of you getting caught are immediately, exploding, which is why the high-end stuff is always in some ranges kind of alone by themselves, or in other ranges with a lot of clean stuff, or shielded by Cloudflare or some other mechanism that puts them in a popular, clean, good range. So in this case, I can't say much, just there's like a bunch of other stuff in there, including Mata, Cobalt Strike, North Korean stuff, Cloud Atlas, and so on.
We don't have any information on the initial infection vector, right? This is Gen found it after it had been sitting on the machine.
I think Gen, right? They say their product was installed on top of this thingy. So this is, by the way, another thing.
After it was already infected.
Yeah, what we noticed is that after some of the big reports that got published around 2012, 13, the golden years again, a lot of APT groups, they switched to this mechanism where if the validator spots one of these big antivirus products on the machine, they just, don't touch it.
Abort. Yeah.
And as a result, there's nothing left. You can't find good things anymore unless somebody installs your product on top of a live infection, either because they suspect something is rotten, or they just suddenly have an idea. Hey, by the way, maybe I should be running a good antivirus solution, and they drop something like Kaspersky or ESET or Gen or Symantec, and so on and so on, and that brings telemetry back home.
And we also don't know what the second stage page never captured, so we don't really know what it actually did.
Yeah, it is a small, very interesting small thing. Like I said, very compact. Like the only thing which seems very strange to me is that the fact that the command and control server was abandoned. So it could be one of those, let's say, one-time burner operations. You burn the CNC, or if you somehow come to the conclusion that this has been exposed, you abandon everything, you abandon the domain. To me, like the only suspicious part would be the fact that they kind of just abandon that completely. I would somehow, I don't know, re-register, put a legitimate website on it. Could be also, maybe you lose access, or maybe you just, it's so toxic that you don't want to touch it again. Or maybe like the whole tradecraft has been exposed. So like when your entire tradecraft is exposed, you don't want to touch that ever again. So then you abandon everything.
That it's on one machine and with a dead domain. It's like just so stand out.
This being the second case that Jen finds, I find this fascinating. The methodology they use to discover these cases is fascinating. And you can only wonder if they can find more, and if they're going to publish more. Probably yes.
They said they were hunting for unusual WMI persistence, right? Like that gives you a sense of like what the...
A lot of people have been hunting for unusual WMI persistence for many years, and this actually brought a lot of interesting things. I remember there may have been even like back in the days a blog post that one of our former colleagues wrote about all sorts of different persistence mechanisms through WMI, including unusual persistence like payload storing mechanisms. However, let's say not many people were able to catch the needle in the haystack. That's typically because, like I said, the moment that you install a product, that kind of breaks things, and they very quickly uninstall the payload, and it goes away, so there's no more telemetry, which may also be the case here.
Shout out to the folks at Gen. I mean, we love reading these things. It's very rare you get Windows malware too. We talked about that in the past. Juanito, is there any meat left on the bones for a threat intel team? Can pick up and go advance this? Is this something you recommend? What's the next step here?
I'm all for the kind of unusual broad hunting, right? Like latching onto a specific thing like this. There's a lot on this sort of thing, but it depends entirely on what kind of visibility we're talking about, right? Like this is the kind of thing that an AV, an endpoint company, somebody that has actual like on disk visibility in some broad capacity should be having a field day with, not looking for the specific indicators, right? That's not going to give you shit by design, but looking for the technique, looking for the mechanism for persistence, looking for, and from there you start broadening out the way that Costin mentioned, right? Like you have your very, very tight rule looking for this specific thing. Then you go, well, what else would use that specific aspect of WMI? Well, actually, like this makes it so there's like an unusual file in this type of machine that got loaded by this thing, right? Okay, what if we made like a broad definition for that? And that's why there's such a big distinction between like detection engineering and hunting, right? Like detection engineering.
That's going to be my next question is like, how do you feed this back into your detection engineering pipelines so that you can do the detection earlier instead of doing forensics?
I think a lot of it has to do with how much, like who we're talking to and how much bandwidth and capability they have, right? So if you're talking to defenders in a big organization who somehow are blessed with capability and bandwidth, meaning that they're not running from one fire to another, then you are going to get a lot out of being able to leverage rules for suspicious things, accepting a higher threshold of false positives that are not alerts. These are not things that you're sending to anybody that's going to have a terrible time triaging, or anybody who's on call, but it's about being able to say, I have a gut feeling that this kind of general way of looking at this problem may surface some other things, and I'd like to look at that. You're going to get some interesting, and persistence is the right way to latch on, right? Like, why is the iOS side of the house like all about exploits with no persistence now? It's like, well, because that's where you get fucked. Wherever you're trying to latch on and say, I need to, reboot and be here and be resident. Well, the list of lol bins and common persistence mechanisms, just because they're written down somewhere does not mean that detection engineering covers them very well. There's a lot of surprising things, right? Like when you look at when we worked on Metador, right? Like they used this like binary that was like a local Windows debugger that no one fucking thinks about, that has a specific flag that nobody knows is there, to load up a thing in a way that you'd never expect to be there, and that's your first step. But you go look at the lolbins list, and like that binary is there, right? So it's like they did something unusual, but not something undocumented. So if you have the time and the bandwidth, like those are the places where you want to latch on, and you want to say, hey, for my free time, for my research for the next, PivotCon or whatever, I'm just going to leave a few lures out here and let's see what pops up. And like that was the kind of magic that was reaping unbelievable results long term for us, because what you don't think about is later you'll come up with something else, and the things that overlap are the ones that will make you stop, right? Like, hey, I came up with 3, 4, 10, 15, 50 rules for like weird random detections. And like, you know what? I get spam with shit all the time. I don't have time to review it. But here's one file, or here's one alert where 3 of those rules just kicked off. What the fuck is this about, right? Like that sort of thing is where you get to enjoy some surprises, right?
Well, is it maybe time to revisit the Metador story with AI? Like, is this potentially one of your new projects?
It hasn't been mine so far. I know Alex Milenkowski has been very interested in that, more so from the reverse engineering standpoint, because Alex bit that bullet, and it was a lot of work, right? Like the way that they had sort of obfuscated these binaries and added, anti-analysis stuff was like hardcore. So I think he wanted to approach it as understanding, again, like we keep evaluating how good these models have gotten at reversing, is go, well, that's another one of the toughest things we've ever had to do, and Alex was a magician for doing it. Can the models do it? Ideally,
that
in
is
that
still
process, something else
right?
shakes out. Yes.
Still.
Yeah.
But do you have your suspicions?
I have my suspicions. I think if you go back through this podcast, I have kept talking about this weird confluence of mercenary groups with a lot of interest in telcos that keep popping up. And I say mercenaries because, well, for a variety of reasons, but in part because they seem to have like a hodgepodge of developer capabilities that reflect the institutional knowledge of multiple places that would not be working together to do this. And they seem to come awful close to like slight criminal, slight, multiple interests being represented in ops, like the kind of things that I expect of a merc. And I don't think that's limited to, I'm not talking even specifically about Metador, but you have multiple scenarios like that of light basin-esque things that, of certain type things, a lot of them to do with telcos. So I would probably be looking at what shifted and what kind of offerings are being given in hush-hush circles in certain international hubs to say, what are these groups? And is there some Argentinian dev working with some former NSA dev, working with some former, DGSC operator, working with some whatever somewhere that's supplying some of these vehicles?
Well, hold on a second, Dave. Now that we're here, I got to do this. Two things. I know this is like doing it a little bit backward, but for the people now listening to the show, who may not be familiar with what Metador is, and this sounds like, oh Lord, there they go and they're inside baseball. Just back up and tell the people what Metador is and was. One.
I have two on my back, actually. I have two for this.
And two, Costin says, are you using AI in your Magic AI access to do it? If you're not, how would you recommend others? Like, what is there on the meat for? Like, how could another team pick up the bones and say, let's go?
So with Metador is a particularly interesting sort of what you might call like a shooting star of an APT, because we saw them, we found them in a telco in the Middle East, and they were pretty well developed. They had some phenomenal OPSEC. They had a very interesting and unusual sort of persistence mechanism that they were using that would then load sort of Cobalt Strike in certain situations so that they could do lateral movement. In others, they would load this sort of like memory resident platform that referred to itself as Meta. Meta main, I am Meta. And from there, you would get this much more interesting platform called Mafalda, which is where I get my joke about sort of an Argentinian being involved. But more than anything, there's references to a thing called Cry Shell, like a custom implant and stuff to do with the C2s. And essentially, what's cool about it is there's a whole lot of very high-end tradecraft being displayed in the way that they build their toolkit, in the way that they move to other machines, and the stages between one thing and another, and the way that they're encrypting the payloads, and the way just that there's aspects of some of the language in the operation that makes this extremely unusual. And something that sticks with me about Mafalda, for example, is like it was build 140 something, right? And we've seen it once, right? Like, so those sorts of things always stick with me, and there's sort of fuck with me, because it's just such a reminder that we have but scratched not
Zero
even the
visibility.
mild surface of what's out there. And in this particular case, it was seen once and then never seen again. But then you get interesting overlaps, right? Like Sandman is another APT with Lua stuff, interested in telcos, that Alex Milankowski discovers, that you go, there's some victim overlaps, there's some, this and that and the other, and you go, what the fuck is going on here? And then, like, same as like when you look at Light Basin, the reason so many people got obsessed with Light Basin is, if I remember correctly, CrowdStrike talks about Light Basin and basically suggests that there's a group doing telco stuff that's moonlighting in criminal stuff. And that's very unusual, right? Because a telco target, a cyber that is like cream of the crop cyber espionage shit, right? Like it's too indirect for a normal group that doesn't have immediate criminal gain. The kind of people who buy the kind of stuff that you can get out of a telco are the kinds of people that you have to do all kinds of complex contracting with and you need to start a new startup and get a different contract and make sure that, you know, you don't hit an American here and there, right? Like, it's a complex thing. So it's not like the kind of thing that you're going to sell on the, you know, on the black market casually. And we're seeing this sort of tradecraft with them that includes like Lua toolkits, that includes, you know, a whole lot of language that looks very, you worked at Five Eyes before, good English. But then the next dude next over is you know, speaking Froglish, and then the other one is making references to things from Latin America. And you go, what the fuck is happening? So my guess here is there's one or more very interesting outfits living in the gray zone, selling to governments, multiple, including non-ally governments in the same shops, that seem to include some Americans that have drifted, maybe some French people who've drifted, maybe some others who've drifted.
And this is all your suppositions from artifacts and little things here and there.
I've seen more than enough things to feel relatively comfortable, not just in what's in the research, to at least point at this vacuous thing. And I want to point to it because I think it's an important part of the discussion that is not really a common part of the discussion when we talk about, you know, these PSOAs and people selling exploits and what's happening on phones, right? Like, the more that we talked about iOS becoming this really hard, really expensive target, there's this notion that, well, that means that these people will just desist in spying. They will just give up. And it's like, no, they fucking won't. They've got requirements and they have money. And if this solution is too expensive, well, it doesn't take a fucking genius to move down the stack and say, well, okay, we can't hit the phones directly. What are the phones, you know, what enables the phones to be connected? ISPs, telcos. What, you know, where do the phones put their data? Cloud backups and cloud services. Well, that's your new tranche of contractors. And that's your new tranche of people doing offensive shit who are going to sell you what? Well, we sit in the hypervisor of this cloud and they've never caught us and we're stealing backups as they move for whatever. We sit in this telco because telcos are unbelievably bad at security most of the time. And I'm not talking about the American ones.
And
I just mean like the amount
of threats, right?
Oh my lord, like, especially, well, in certain regions and certain places where you walk in and what you're doing is like you're going with a fucking bat and like trying to fucking hit the like shitty APTs out of the way so that you can make it to which ones are the cool APTs, because there's 12 APTs and I don't want to waste my fucking time with these, right? It's like, so but guys,
that's like the worst swinging of a bat I've ever seen, man.
Well, I have this I moved the microphone from the left to the right, and I am having I'm hitting it. I'm like, anyways.
I'll give you a pass on that. Then I don't think you've ever saw a bat in your life, though.
That's true. That's true.
Best stories are always like, "Hey, we were called to do an incident response at this ISP for some shitty group, and we found this ISP. Other thing."
Every
how
time.
many times did we hear it?
Dude, because it's like the key. Every ISP is a magnet of threats. We don't have to have a fucking conversation about like which ones are special. Especially if you've ever talked to Mark Rogers, shout out to Mark Rogers, our boy, who just had another surgery and is recovering.
Yeah,
hopefully
soon, of course.
Doing better things than listening to our pod right now. But if you've ever talked to Mark, he's got this great knowledge about how telco backends work. He used to work at Vodafone and has done some really interesting shit. And it's surprising just how much of the privileged accesses for ISPs and telcos are also very flat. Like, if you think about it, right? I have, maybe I live in like Turkmenistan and I own the ISP there. If there's only one, and I own the telco. And I just so happen to be so anal about security that we have the greatest security of all time for this mythical Turkmenistan telco. And then the fucking country next door has the shittiest security of all time. And our phones and all of our IPs and all of our services have to work when you cross the border. So like the amount of shit that's like segmented into like you need to be part of the telco club to even have access to this. But once you're part of the telco club, you have access to all this shit. It's like, it's phenomenal. It's fascinating. So the security on the back end, as many people learn with like SS7 and like some of these other things, is kind of atrocious. And when you consider that like there's kind of this flat access, getting access to some shitty ISP in the middle of fucking nowhere means that you suddenly have access to a whole lot of other shit. And it's more about like big data problems, distribution problems, where you go, there is so much data traversing through here that in reality, the problems you have to solve are mostly about what data is valuable, how do I correlate the things I find in here, how do I like what is my desired state? Am I just here to try to steal SMS messages? Am I just here to try to figure out what the list of like registration of customers to specific IMEIs is? Am I interested in the data side, like as in like what the internet data pipeline is for these customers through my stuff? Am I interested in the fucking cell towers and a specific cell tower? Am I interested in being able to listen to phone calls? Am I interested? Like, there's so many fucking things in there, right? And you have to understand the telco from the inside, and then you have to build capabilities to somehow splice and grab and do without messing anything up, and somehow collect all that information and parse it in ways that, like, I mean, if the NSA, the Heilbronn, GCHQ in the Heilbronn, what is it, machine learning problems book, if I remember, that's probably not the right name. They had to design hardware just to be able to parse these things in order to then be able to use selectors on these things. So, like, doing espionage in telcos is no joke if you want to do cool shit. But I bet you every telco is interested.
Can you imagine that was 2022? Metador was LabsCon 1 in 2022. Now we're at LabsCon 5, a month away. It's crazy how time flies. Shout out to Amitai as well, who participated in that research, and Milenkowski, of course. I remember you guys on stage.
Amitai Ben-Shushan Amitai Ben-Shushan Ehrlich is the first one he discovered it. He found Metador. And credit to Alex Milenkowski, who was able to actually work through that fucking reversing, which was an unbelievable nightmare his first few months on the job. So it's nice. A good story, man.
Good story to pick up and take forward as well. There's a lot of meat on the bones there. Costin, I want to pivot very quickly to another needle in a haystack find, it seems. It appears to me Kaspersky, our old team, the great research team, documented something they're calling armored Likho, also known as Eagle Werewolf, a cyber espionage group focused on targets in Russia, including private individuals, corporations, government, and IT and education sectors in Russia. Our friend Ivan K., who you mentioned earlier, he thinks it's a very interesting threat actor. It's not every day that you get what looks like a Western APT. Is this a Western APT based on what you read out to Kaspersky?
And by the way, I think it's important to mention that Kaspersky wrote about armored Likho, I think, in July. So this is like the July there was an article on armored Likho. Now There's another article on armored Likho. Yeah. The name seemed familiar, and I just checked that there was a thorough blog in July as well when they were talking about this busy snake stealer used by armored Likho. So I don't know if it's depends how you define a Western threat actor. To me, it would appear that all these things, in particular this Likho, whatever they call them, they seem to have some kind of a Ukrainian angle. So if you consider like Ukraine to be a Western actor, then I guess yes. Although Ukraine, by my definition, it seems to be in the eastern part of Europe. So I don't know if it's a Western or not.
Well, for purposes of our conversation, when we say Western, I don't include Ukraine in that. I mean, just...
You don't include Ukraine?
Well,
do you? So do any of us?
That's the thing, Ryan, and I think Costin's pointing out something really important in some of the way that we generally approach these things, not just the armored Likho, but for example, we will, and I'm fucking guilty of this. We will often talk about, let's say, the Israeli APTs and say Western APTs, right? Like, well, you know, there's
True.
But they're in the Middle East, right?
Yeah,
True.
yeah.
But we lump them in as Western.
Yeah, but I think that's the point. I think we need to point out an inconsistency that's like a common inconsistency, a common idiosyncrasy in threat intel, where we seem to be talking, when we say Western, which we don't often say, but when we say Western, we seem to be referring to some kind of alliance, some kind of, but it's not Five Eyes, right?
It's not
Five Eyes, right? It's not Five Eyes. It's not 14 Eyes. It's not quite like it seems to suggest like friends with a giant fucking asterisk around it, right? Because it includes Israel. It now seems to include Ukraine. It seems for the most part Western Europe. And the US and Canada and
Australia,
Australia, well, yeah, obviously Australia, New Zealand, and so on. But there's sort of like there's a deep inconsistency to it, and I don't think it's the way that anyone on the inside would look at it, right? Because to them, every player is a player, and like beyond, historically, anything that wasn't Five Eyes is fair game, right? Like, and you have an expectation that they're spying on you, and you have an expectation that you need to care about their toolkit, which is why territorial dispute includes signatures for Israeli APTs and French APTs and, all these other guys, but nothing on Reagan or anybody that we would recognize as the other guys. That's all just kind of grandfathered in.
What else about this armored Likho stand out to you, Costin? Is there any? Are you convinced it's Ukrainian? I mean, we went off on a little bit of a tangent there about what Western mean, but I'm asking.
But it would appear they're like hitting Russia very heavily, and given the context and the events that are happening right now, that would be a fair assumption, I guess. And there are a few things which kind of remind of Cloud Atlas. From what I heard, from what I know, what used to be Cloud Atlas is now something like maybe 5 times bigger, and just like the Lazarus group from the old days now has like a lot of tentacles and subgroups and spin-offs. Very well, pretty much the same can be said about Cloud Atlas, meaning there's many subgroups nowadays. Cloud Atlas is this threat actors that Norman wrote about back in the days, and I think we also published about it back in the days because it looked very similar to Red October. So originally we thought it was a comeback of Red October, but eventually it would appear that it was just, let's say, half of Red October, and that half of Red October kind of continued their focus, refocused their efforts on Russia and kept improving their toolkit, kept improving their skills, their numbers, and now their operations, like I said, having split into multiple subgroups. So at the moment, the companies that you see the most publishing about this kind of activities are Russian companies. So that includes Kaspersky, of course, but Positive Technologies, the Solar team at Russia Telecom. So all these companies, they're seeing a lot of activity potentially connected to Ukrainian cyber operations.
And they're the only people who can see it, basically, right? Because they're the only people installed there with visibility.
They're not the only ones that see them. They're the only ones that are talking about it. A lot of people are seeing these things.
Well, right? They're like the ones who care the most, I guess, because they see them. Like you pretty much end up writing about the things that you see the most and the things that actually give you the biggest headaches from your point of view. Like the ones that your customers are suffering the most from. And it would appear that these Cloud Atlas aligned groups, they are like giving like a lot of headaches to Russian companies. So no surprise that we're seeing so many blogs about them. One thing which is a bit suspicious or strange to me is that we don't see like very good operational security. We see a lot of easy to pivot things. We see a lot of infrastructure that can be expanded very easily. So from this point of view, the kind of, the sophistication of the cyber operations is not like at the very, very top. But there is a lot, I think, that is not visible happening under the hood in terms of orb networks potentially associated with this activity, like used for anonymization purposes, including possibly like mobile activity and destructive activities. So there's just like a small fragment of what is happening, but for sure one of the noisiest.
Can you talk a little bit about the quality of the report? Did you get IOCs? Is there additional work that you can jump on and do and figure out?
What I noticed is that most recently a lot of blogs on SecureList, they come with a lot of hashes, but those hashes are nowhere to be found. So there's no samples anywhere on VirusTotal. I put them for monitoring. It means like if you want to research this further, you don't have the samples unless you ask them from Kaspersky, or if you, have some kind of a presence or footprint in Russia, maybe you get them through your telemetry. But it appears that those samples are very, very focused, and they just don't exist on VirusTotal, which means that for some of the blogs, there's actually nothing you can research from a sample point of view. There's no samples you can find to download. For this most recent blog, there is a bunch of samples that are on VirusTotal. I think about half of them, or maybe less than half, 40% of them, maybe they're on VirusTotal. So you can take a look at those samples at least. But I did notice that a lot of blogs, they come with these MD5 hashes. That are all of them, they're linked to OpenTip. OpenTip being the VirusTotal-like portal that Kaspersky maintains. And there's no samples available on VirusTotal for any of those, or pretty much anywhere else on any other website that provides malware samples.
If it's not the Ukrainians, who else would it possibly be?
Considering that, on one hand, there's Russian drones flying into Romania almost every day nowadays. Like there was one yesterday, I think, flying into Romania, was shot down by a Spanish F-18 pilot. And before that, there were a few others that were shot down by Romanian F-16 pilots. So I would say Romania has a very strong cyber interest into knowing what's going on in there. As well as all the Baltics, which, from what we hear, they're very capable technologically and very skilled, very versed in cyber operations, just that we haven't seen any of those operations before.
Juanito, any last words on this one before we move on?
No, just sort of the weird Westernness, quote unquote, of it all. Though what I will say is something pretty neat was seeing this Verlab sort of reversing capability that our friend Ivan has put forth, and that it turned out like a C2 server that hadn't been discussed in the blog. I mean, it's nice to see this kind of stuff giving sort of like quick wins and even above whatever human analysts can produce quickly, right? So shout out to
all the people who's finding needles in haystacks, man. We still have people doing some research.
Another thing that we noticed recently was that Kaspersky, whenever they push out a blog, they don't publish all the IOCs. They typically publish a subset, which is maybe 20%, 30% of all the IOCs they have in the private papers. So it may very well be
that. How do you know that?
How do I know that?
You get the private papers.
I know
Look
that.
at this, man.
I know that it's pretty obvious there are other samples simply by looking into OpenTip. So actually, OpenTip allows you to create free accounts, and with those free accounts, you can see, for instance, detection names. So by looking for samples with detection names, you can find very easily other samples that it's pretty obvious they're related to those indicators.
It's obvious that they have it and they choose not to release it. And why would that be?
Yes, for commercial reasons, which in my opinion is a very good reason. And it's one of the practices that we also kind of, established back in the days, which was you need to, for every blog, you need to release IOCs. Like if you publish a blog without IOCs, you fail at cyber. Like you fail at life and cyber. So you need to publish IOCs in your technical blog where you talk about malware. There have to be IOCs and ideally ARA rules, okay? But you need to publish, in my opinion, enough IOCs that allow other people to understand what you're talking about. So whenever somebody comes and they publish some end of the world, panic blog over Salt Typhoon with 0 IOCs, that's failing at life. So you need to give at least a few IOCs for people to understand what the hell are you talking about. So it doesn't have to be everything, just a set. And it's perfectly fine, in my opinion, if you don't publish everything and you keep a bunch of IOCs for your private customers, to make sure that you can still track this threat actor in the future, that they just don't abandon all that and they move to something else and then you need to start from scratch. So there's a good reason why you don't publish everything, but still you need to publish something.
Is this something that everyone does? Is this like just standard operating procedure and you're calling out Kaspersky for it? Or you see like there's a change in behavior?
No, well, I'm not saying it's bad, actually. I'm actually saying that Kaspersky, typically they publish more IOCs than others. Like other companies, I see them publish one-off. Like this one-off technique is something that we've also done in the past. We publish one hash for like every family that we describe in the blog. So this one hash, this one hash, this one hash. So you end up, let's say, maybe with 3 hashes. Also, you have 30 in your collection. So other companies, to be honest, they don't publish that many IOCs. I think Kaspersky publishes a very good amount of IOCs. Same for Symantec. Symantec also publish IOCs a lot. ESET, they also publish IOCs. Gen Digital, they also publish IOCs. Sentinel Labs, they publish a lot of IOCs. Yeah.
Well, we don't sell them on the side, right? So it's a lot easier to do that, right?
Yeah, selling them on the side is like the commercial thing Costin is endorsing anyway. So, I mean, that's the weird thing about selling it on the side to me is that it becomes not a haves or have-nots. And if I'm a big organization and I'm buying it from you, I only get your visibility. And then now I have to buy it from everyone. And there isn't a central place where and it just becomes chaos to manage. So nobody gets good intel.
You want the subscription that gives you everyone's IOCs, right? Like you want to pay like a flat fee and they give you like the best package of the month, which includes, from everyone. So I think
is that a TLP Black ad?
No, we don't. Like, I mean, how can you for I think the affordable prices that we offer, how can you resell everyone else's IOCs? The cost would be huge, in my opinion.
Did you guys get a chance to look at this any .run organization into this Lazarus Group IT workers scheme? I didn't get
before we go there,
carefully.
By the way.
Yeah.
I think that there's value into what you're saying here, and there's like a lot of potential to this idea where there's like kind of a free IOC market, if you want. So let's say where you can go and say, hey, I need more armored Likho IOCs, or I go there and I say I need more 12 kilobyte backdoor IOCs. I'm ready to pay for them. I don't need like everything. I don't need your like subscription for 1 year. I just need more IOCs of that particular thing. And this is one of the projects that our good friend Stefan Tanase is working on, called CTI DAO. which in theory covers this need, where let's say somebody needs some more IOCs of something very specific, and other people can provide a package of IOCs, purely defensive things, to cater to that specific needs, be it network IOCs, IP addresses, host name, hashes, YARA rules, passive DNS telemetry, whatever. So I think there's potential there, and this
Where
is
do we
one
find this
possibility.
DAO thing? Is this a crypto thing, though?
It's a project.
It's a crypto marketplace thing, right?
I think the most difficult thing to understand here is for people is how to separate the, let's say, cyber CTI threat intelligence part from the financial side of things. So like, I need IOC, but how do you pay for them, right? And how do you make it in such a way that doesn't require necessarily like contracts between researchers and companies and whoever needs it? And I think that's where you say there's like this crypto part, which in my opinion is just one part of the project. The value would come from the ability to intermediate the need, like the demand and the offer and the demand in the IOC market, which like
gap,
a very practical
like
example.
Addressing that specific gap that gets you like the niche IOC for a very specific thing at a very specific place.
And not everything. Like you can say, I need only IOCs of this particular. Like I give you an example right now, this Liechtenstein attack, right, that we discussed the last time.
Yeah.
I think everyone would want IOCs of the Liechtenstein attack, but nobody shares them, or like nobody has them. So that would be like a very high value package or IOC set that people would be interested in. And I think there's still a value into having a purely defensive, KYC style platform where you can acquire targeted IOCs as opposed to monthly packages or yearly packages.
Shout out to my man Stefan Tanase, by the way. Tanase always doing interesting things. I remember, we were going to pivot to this Any Run blog, and I remember Tanase and you working on
that's
project.
another good connection, right?
Yeah. Juanito, you wanted to jump in?
Tibetans.
I think, I prefer the Tibetan story, to be honest with you. If you're not going to tell it,
no.
I think it would be, there's something about the packaging of IOCs that sort of reminds of the fact that we are treating the consumers of these things in a weird one-size-fits-all package, right? Like, it's starting with the private reporting, but also, selling people IOCs. There's such a weird mismatch because there's no easy way to say these are the IOCs that are relevant to you, versus like what Costin describes is researchers wanting IOCs or defenders in a very, very big sort of interesting space getting to use big sets of IOCs. But like for most, like why has threat intel failed to permeate the security market at the consumer level, at smaller levels, SMB levels, so on? It's like, well, you're not really appealing to people that have less resources and an uncertainty of need, but mostly because you can't walk in there and say, hey, random 50-person company that makes money, that is important, that is a part of critical infrastructure, that's part of the supply chain, that's, that matters, but is not in a position to, burn money on maybe valuable tooling that is, 3 levels removed from where they are. Being able to walk in and say, hey, in your particular case, I have these 12 IOCs, artisanally curated, highly refined, that happen to be relevant to you because you have this, unusual WMI toolkit in your infrastructure somewhere. I have something to sell you. Like there's the real issue in threat intel is this inability to properly match the people who are actually in need with the people who are actually in know. And if you could, this would be a completely different fucking market. Like if Microsoft, for example, were the channel sales mechanism between threat intel providers and anybody that has a Windows endpoint that has a relevant issue, right? Obviously, this is not part of their interest. This is not part of what they're trying to sell or do. But if that magical mechanism existed, threat intel would be a completely different world, right? Like, this is me sort of wildly sort of waxing lyrical about what could be, but I think there's an important insight there for why threat intel in so many ways, like private reporting, was considered sort of a failed business or a very limited business. And I don't think, I don't say that that's the case. I just think maybe failure, if you're defining it by VC money standards, by the kind of multipliers that make what are very valuable and useful companies look like, as they like to call them, lifestyle businesses, right? Where it's a lifestyle business because only you and the people who worked hard are going to get rich, right? If it doesn't allow the VCs to get rich. But I think a part of that is this inability to sort of match the two.
They'll think there would be a lot of companies willing to buy, let's say, undiscovered things like needles in the haystack, purely for threat intelligence purpose, either to research it or to dig further.
Do you think this is already happening in silence that we don't know about, or it's just something that's already happening which is just not publicly spoken about?
I mean, let's be honest. Like one of the things that we were selling was something like that. Like back in the days, threat intelligence services, we were essentially selling needles in the haystack, because this is what a lot of people would say is the most interesting thing they want to read. They want to read about new unknown threat actors that no one else knows about. Like, we know everything. We know a lot about all these Chinese, Russian, very well-known groups, but we don't know a lot, let's say, about Dark Hotel, or we don't know a lot about Argentinian developers who work with the French and Canadians to put together like this light basin style operations, or we're just interested in pretty much anything that is not kind of unattributed, and we want to research that further. So there is value in this kind of threat intelligence that deviates from the standard big flux of data that you can buy from the big companies.
It's not a big giant market though, right? This is a small niche
very
market,
specialized. It would be very specialized. I think the customers would be mostly intelligence agencies that want to know if they got busted by one of these companies. And at the same time, they would need some kind of a guarantee that particular company publishes everything they discover first through this channel. Because if they say, they buy the subscription and then every now and then there's a drop that was not in the private set, that would be, let's say, kind of a discouragement for acquiring such a service. But still, nevertheless, if the feed is valuable, if the IARA rules bring unique things that no one else knows
somebody's going to buy it.
Someone is going to buy it, and especially if there's IARA rules that have zero matches on any samples anywhere, those IARA rules probably are very valuable.
But you see the mismatch there, right? Like, why is it a small market? Because there are definitely people to whom it matters a lot, whose information is not readily available, and there's people who know a lot and can, garner a lot out of that information, who are not in any way in touch with those folks, and there's no contracting vehicle between the two, right? Like that's where a lot of this sort of, if there was so much crying about telemetry hoarding by these big shops, right? Your Googles, your Microsofts, your everywheres, right? You, in large part, it's this sort of missed opportunity that comes with telemetry that is unbelievably valuable to folks like us that can never make it our way, and in many ways is treated, you can say it's a privacy thing, which it isn't. You can say that it's a market differentiator, which it isn't. because they're not using it, right? And you can, so it's just like a lost opportunity. It's just letting people kind of languish under supervision because no one can be bothered to make the kind of exchange platform that would properly enable this.
I want to call attention to one last threat in the interest of, in the celebration of threat research that this entire episode has been, is this collaboration between these guys called Any.Run, joint investigation with BCLA, NorthScan. They actually infiltrated one of these North Korean IT workers scheme and got recruited as a fake frontman engineer and was managing laptop. So I was able to really, really spy on the operations of what one of these North Korean thing pops up. I am very much in favor of this kind of real deep research. Even if you have to camouflage yourself as something, we mentioned the Tibetan monks earlier, which is another big piece of big favorite of mine. Costin, I remember the Silverlight trap setting, big favorite of mine. Juanito, you early on this show talked about some of the things people should be doing around with some of these domains and so on to do real background research or throwing prompts at fucking agents. Did you get a chance to look at this North Korean thing? Is this something you endorse, and did we learn anything from it at all, Costin?
Well, my brother, first of all, want to say it's very cool research to read, and I think it was initially presented at Black Hat. I didn't have the chance yet to see the whole speech, but
this was a Black Hat talk. I did not know that.
This was a Black Hat talk.
I see.
Right. One thing which I remember, I mean, of course, just go out there, read the blog, read the research, because it's really very cool stuff. There's one thing which kind of stays in my memory. So back in the days when allegedly some kind of similar research happened, a journalist immediately came and wrote an article suggesting that this is unethical, it's misleading, it's hurting these poor communities of people who, I don't know, either conduct operations or somehow.
I didn't know you were going to go there.
Yeah, but I just want to bring this up because it doesn't sit right with me. And I think journalists, they have a responsibility to encourage positive things and discourage some of the bad things. Obviously, the times have changed. But nevertheless, I think journalists have the responsibility to understand these stories and their implication of these stories and to encourage the things that sit right. And it's very easy to go on to, let's say, the wrong side of history, write the wrong story, and then the story stays there out forever, and your journalistic reputation is forever collapsing and tarnished, and people know you as the person who shit on that research, or the person who shit on the other conference, or the person who shit on that book, or I don't know, or who wrote that book, or who knows. So just kind of kind request.
You're a little cryptic,
to try to understand. I'm a little cryptic, but people who need to understand,
the people
understand.
Who know, they know.
The people who know. And the people who need to understand. So I salute the journalists who write positive stories and understand this kind of cutting edge research, because I think it's very cutting edge. And there are some kind of ethical implications, legal implications, all sorts of implications. But
this is the only way you get some of this real work done. It's the only way.
True. And we all understand that is needed, and we all understand the value as it is done from a purely defensive point of view in order to catch the bad guys and to expose how the bad guys operate. That is the goal here. So the goal is not to fool the poor, hardworking IT workers who, either need to bring $4,000 or they end up in a gulag. So the angle is very important. The angle of these stories is very important. And this is my message to the journalists is try to understand these stories in depth before you write about them, and talk to the researchers. And some of these stories, they can never be talked in full. I attended many TLP Red, TLP Black level talks that probably can never be written about in public due to the nature of how that research was conducted in the first place. And still, they were awesome, absolutely awesome research stories. And probably one day they will be written in a book or something. But it's important to not to ruin the value of those stories, in my opinion, and to encourage similar research from new generations.
How much of that is like real journalists being real journalists as opposed to, the sort of ambulance chasers with nothing better to do who like want to come write up a negative story about like, oh, I can't believe people did this. And you're like, okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of hypothetical harm that could hypothetically happen to hypothetical people who no one can seem to find, right? Like, got it. It just doesn't seem like let's call a spade in that situation, right? It's trying to like farm for outrage out of not having anything better to provide.
At the same time, while we're endorsing this kind of non-traditional research, which could be in the line of like, let's call it stunt research, I don't want to be endorsing idiot DEF CON attendees on a Delta flight messing with the in-flight Wi-Fi.
Oh dear!
Right? Like there's some stunt things that are, I don't know what Costin is saying, understandable or almost expected, and there's some just bozo things that you just don't do. And it's like the fact that we still telling guys this is fast. It's just annoying. Shout out to the Any Run and these collab guys. I'm a big fan of these types of research. I think that's what like traditional investigative journalism is anyway. A lot of like, pretending to be someone, a lot of like, not shady, but like a lot of gray area stuff. That's the only way you get information. Hands-on
research. Farm to table research.
Another threat intel piece that I forgot about as well was this dream thingy. Have you been following this dreamgroup.com blog on some Chinese hackers hitting Taiwan with some autonomous AI cyber attack? According to the research, Dream found a complete working directory of an AI attack framework, an autonomous AI attack framework that spent 4 days in early July 2026 breaking into Asian government systems, including thousands of files, thousands of personal records, persistent backdoors. Did you look at this Dream thingy at all, Costin?
Yes. And my first question, who is Dream Group? Or like, can you tell us who is behind Dream Group?
I don't know.
I haven't heard of Dream Group before.
Apparently, Dream Group is Shalev Julio's new interesting outfit that is apparently
Julio,
doing.
I wonder.
Our friend from who is he? But is it the S in NSO? Which is,
Costin is asking answers, basically.
Yeah, I'm curious about the research while also being far more curious about like what this positioning is. It's not quad dreams or tri dreams. It's just single dreams, and we don't know where these dreams have come from.
Right? You know me, like. When I open the research, I scroll to the bottom. What do I need to see in the bottom of the blog? Like, SHA-256. I did the same here. There's no IOCs. Whenever I see the blog without IOCs at the end, like, what is the conclusion? Either there's an agenda behind it. What's the agenda? FUD, typically. Fear, uncertainty, doubt. You want to scare the shit out of people. So that they come and maybe ask for more information, buy your product, buy your tool. Basically, no one else can investigate this in deep because like there's no information that others can do on their own to do some kind of validation of all these claims. Remember
why
whenever
the fuck didn't you delete it from the list then? Why are we talking about this?
Because it's important. It's important to talk about like all sides of the coin, right? And to call out if a blog doesn't have IOCs. Like we want people to have this mentality. We want journalists particularly to do this whenever they look at some kind of research. We want the journalists to go to the page, scroll to the bottom. Are there IOCs? If there's no IOCs, there's a new company who's in this company. Like you need to understand the agenda. What is the agenda? What is this blog about? Like whoever published the blog, what is their agenda? That is the question. So that's why I think it's important to mention it. It would be nice. Look, it would be nice if they had IOCs. Would be nice if they had IOCs because other people could try to look into this story as well.
the other side of this, and the reason I kind of put it up, even though I clearly could have gone a little more in depth in it, but like part of the reason I wanted it here is just to note this kind of weird sudden shift, right? Like this person who was defending this very important PSOA for very long is now pushing this what looks like a threat intel shop, and that's okay. Like it's not like we're hanging him out to dry as like an irredeemable character, but this is a shift that I don't feel we just sort of take casually. You just oh, new job, cool. Anyways, you're like, no, what the fuck's going on? And what is Dream? And where did this come from? And what data are you getting? Where are you getting the data? Are you doing the things that you used to do? Because that would be interesting, right? Like that would fit more in the mold of what we were started talking about at the beginning of this episode, right? Like, does living in Cyprus or wherever mean that you can actually pop a server here and there and then be like, look at the cool threat intel I just found because I'm in their boxes? And you go, fair game, cool, sounds great. Wish we could play that way, but tell us what you found. Or is this just, threat intel looks like a nice side hustle until the next thing kind of comes around?
I want to just call out, we're running out of time, but I want to call attention to Symantec also has a blog post on Jewel Bug. At security.com. That's a great domain, by the way, security.com/threat intelligence. Symantec. Jewelbug is a Chinese-based hacker for hire group that runs parallel operations, espionage against governments and militaries across the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South Asia, and a for-profit cryptocurrency fraud business. Who is behind this thing? Because this is like a Chinese nation-state people moonlighting as like criminals.
There's actually... So the Symantec blog actually says there's a known company behind it. So there's like a commercial entity who has been associated with this ref group. One of the names they're known, I think they're known as ref 7707, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a real company behind this particular threat actor, although they don't name the company, and I don't think that it's been publicly named anywhere. At least I don't remember having seen that name. Anyway, it's like one of those curious cases where there's a known Chinese company behind it, not nation state, well, not directly nation state, so it's not a military unit. There's no unit whatever behind it, but it's a commercial entity. And I guess the curious thing is this financial angle they have when they're moonlighting as cryptocurrency scam business operators on the side to their cyber espionage operations.
Did you get IOX?
Oh, yes. With this, yes. Symantec
we're judging every report now by IOX.
As should we.
Yeah, there's a bunch of network indicators and IPs and stuff in there at the bottom of the blog. I don't know the quality of them, but yeah.
Come on, it's Symantec, it's Vikram, it's
Vikram.
Like the folks we know, you can trust
these are people
if we're gonna shit on someone for not included, let's applaud
years.
The guys who drop it, right?
Of course.
Table stakes, man.
I am, like I said, I'm suspicious whenever there's a new company that people haven't heard about, and this new company drops some groundbreaking research with no IOX, and that is a red light whenever you see it. But companies that have been around for 30 years, for 3-4 decades, with IOX, and they write, let's say, solid research papers, there's no question.
I wonder what kind of telemetry Google is sitting on with this whole GDOT command and control stuff, right? Like, there's a lot of interesting tidbits here.
I think one of the important stories we didn't have time to cover this week was the release of this new Gemini model and all the shuffling that is going on inside Google as we're trying to stay alive in the AI cyber wars.
Well, let's go there quickly because Juanito, you say oof. You're the one who consistently several times on this podcast says Google is set up to be the eventual winner. Google has all the data. Google has all the search engine and the YouTube, and Google has everything. They have all the money. They have all the brains. They have DeepMind. And now here we are. Defend yourself.
I'm not defending shit. I have always said that Google has
Google
everything
will be the
they
winner.
need. I've always said that Google will be a winner, and that's not me pulling back. That's me pointing at something very specific. Google has everything they need. They also have a completely sick shit culture that means that nobody will ever get to do what they should do or make moves or be quick or in any way like be able to innovate in any interesting capacity despite having everything on earth, everything you could ever want. Right? Like, and I could just rattle off a list of names and failures and killed by Googles and even like effects on VirusTotal and, and what they did to Chronicle. Like, there's so many ways that you can look at Google and be like, okay, what the fuck, right? There's something wrong with this place. At the same time, they have everything. And it means that they will almost certainly not be the people to figure it out, quote unquote, to like come up with whatever the next thing is. But when someone figures out what the next thing is, it will be relatively easy for them to turn around and serve the next thing at planet scale. And that's not something anybody else can easily do. Right? Like that's the thing about Google. It will be a winner no matter what, unless, Sundar finds a way to continue to fucking burn it to the ground for short-term gains. But you can't look at Google and say they won't be able to catch up. It's very unlikely.
They have had a significant brain drain over there, though. They've lost a ton of big names. There's some like reshuffling of the deck at the top. It feels very much like it's recognized internally that things are shit.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's the fascinating thing is that they even figured out themselves that it's shit, right? Like it's that's sort of what's hard about Google is sort of penetrating this bizarre irrationality field that everybody lives in this sort of self-contained universe. Now, when you talk about brain drain at Google, one thing I'll say is it is the one company that is resistant to brain drain in some capacity because what it does is systematize things very well. So whatever was built up until now will not decay, is my read. And that's something that you have to give Google credit for, because just about anywhere else, the day the principals walk out, things start to decay. I don't expect that to be the case at Google for the things built up until now. What I think has just walked out is any remaining innovation, right? Ability to say, hey, we need to build this mega scale dream machine that will cost $1 bajillion for the purposes of doing this insane thing slightly faster in a way nobody's ever done before because YOLO, right? It's look, I have talked about Google. I've beaten them to death about their culture, and people think it's like sour grapes because of Chronicle or because I'm opinionated or whatever the fuck it is. It is not. It's because you look at this place, and even Jeff fucking Dean, the God mode engineer, if there ever was one, being the head of Google Drain, being like the ultimate fucking celebrated fellow, cannot get Google to do whatever the fuck it is he wanted to do. It tells you everything you need to know about the culture at this place. That you're willing to walk away from financial stability and the massive scale of resources, data centers, dark fiber that connects the world, the ability to reach multiple billions of daily active users with whatever you build. You're willing to leave all of that behind to build something somewhere else. It's You can't say it's a lack of seniority. You can't say that they couldn't get the message across. You can't say that it's not somebody with enough clout. You can't say it's someone you don't trust to execute. You can't say that the message didn't get up to the board, to the executives, to the whatevers. You can't say any of that. And it's 4 principals walking out on the same day that you announce that Demis Hassabis is no longer the CEO of DeepMind. He's now the chair of God knows what, and DeepMind now reports to an SVP under Sundar. What the fuck? Hello, IBM 2.
Costin, you want to give us a quick AI recap? It's the latest in the fast changing week to week world of which model is and give the people a quick TLDR and what's going on in your AI land.
I mean, I was in vacation, but I mean, this has been a kind of a crazy week for all sorts of reason for the local AI people. So everyone has been waiting for Qwen 3.8, the 28 billion parameters model to drop. They promised to make it available on August, was it 12th? And it dropped on August 12th. There was some kind of a countdown, similar to NASA launching a space shuttle or whatever. So people were waiting. There was a counter on Hugging Face, like 4 more hours, 2 more hours. Eventually they dropped. And it seems to be a pretty good model. People are already talking about, Opus level model running on your hardware at home. I played a bit with it, to be honest. Even the old Qwen 3.6 28B was pretty capable, but the problem with this Qwen
3.8
to 28 billion models, the problem is that they're generally very slow on home hardware. So, of course, if you have something like a 5090, NVIDIA 5090, yes, that it can be fast, or on like a R6000 series NVIDIA card. But on a MacBook or like a Mac Mini, as I have like right here, it only reaches maybe 20 tokens per second, something like that. Even on the DGX Spark. Even on the DGX Spark, because like particularly these dense models, they're not very fast on the DGX Spark. It's not the same as a mixture of experts models, which have only like a smaller number of experts activated, like A3B, the Qwen 35B, A3B models are way much faster on this kind of hardware. So I think on one hand, it's extremely, extremely capable. A lot of people, they're rejoicing and they have like a new toy to play with. At the same time, it's slow, so like it can take, I don't know, hours to run this at extra high effort on certain tasks. But at the same time, what else dropped? GLM 5.3, which I think is also pretty big news. GLM, Zhipu, like another Chinese company, they are now recruiting cybersecurity companies to play with this model for cyber purposes. There's a Google Docs that's being passed around on X for companies that want to try to apply with it, right? Grok 4.6, which was also dropped, which, by the way, remember when I said 4.1 was amazing, then 4.3 was shit, then 4.5 was released, was also shit, and now 4.6 is amazing again. It's like this is totally unpredictable. Like, it's impossible to say if something will be good or bad. But I tell you that I played again a bit with Grok 4.6, and it's amazing again. Gemini 3.7. Oh, and also Meta. Meta dropped Meta Muse, Muse Spark 1.2. Another local model that you can run, and Muse Glimmer, you can run it locally on hardware. Pretty good stuff. Like there's a lot happening, and I saw a lot of discussions from the U.S. Political circles about soon the world having to choose between
pick a side.
Pick a side. Either the so-called
you're
Pax
either Western
Silica,
or you're Chinese, right? Yeah.
The Pax Silica or the Chinese world of things. And I would assume that this will become more visible in the next months. But like props to the Western companies who release open weight models that you can run locally. At least you have a choice, right? The worst thing is that you may not have a choice. I mean, if you want to run like the best or at least one of the best models, the only choice you have is this or
Chinese.
that. Mm-hmm.
The other notable thing here in this conversation is the price of DJX Spark. Like these things, these hardware is going through the
selling
roof.
for 8,000 euros on Amazon, right?
I will be
Right.
smuggling
Whereas a year
DJX
ago when we
Sparks
were
to Europe.
Yeah, a year ago when we were at this countermeasures conference, it was what, in the $4,000 range? It's almost doubled.
Yeah, but only the NVIDIA, so the golden one, the Founders Edition, only that one is super expensive. Like if you get something as a Asus version of it, it's still like 3,500 euros, somewhere in that range. I mean,
color.
just give me a second. I'll grab one.
Costin is walking across his room.
He's got props
to go get his stuff.
Like this is the Asus version. So this is like the Asus. I think it looks maybe not as good. Like the build is maybe not the quality of the NVIDIA.
It sounds plasticky. I can hear the plastic. Yeah.
It is plasticky, while the NVIDIA one was fully metal, like this gold metal and this sponge-like structure around it. So
I would grab mine, but it's doing stuff.
Long term, I would say it's possible that long term this may burn faster, especially if you hit it like very heavily. If you put a lot of processing into it, it may burn faster. It may not have the same kind of thermal dissipation as the NVIDIA one, which by the way gets super hot. Like if you run something heavy on the NVIDIA, you can cook omelets on that thing. And also I saw like an interesting tip on X recently where people discovered that not the NVIDIA, but these Asus units, they're actually shutting down after a couple of days under heavy load. And they discovered it was actually because of thermal throttling and internal self-protection. And you can mitigate that by lowering the frequency by 5%. So performance drops for about 5%. But at least it doesn't shut down in mid-flight, so you can use it for longer.
I'm guessing you haven't had those issues with the Spark, right? Like, I don't think I'm driving mine hard enough yet. Like, I'm only now getting to set up like the ConnectX-7 cable and like now using them together and going to try to sort of figure out some of these bigger models, but I haven't had any issues like that.
I think the only issues, I don't know if that was particular issue with my unit. If you remember, even when we tried to set it up when we were in Ottawa, there were some network issues that would randomly disconnect. And those kind of issues persisted until I did a full upgrade a couple of months ago. And after that upgrade, the issues went away. So I would assume there were some kind of firmware problems.
Linux shit, brother. Linux shit.
Like,
it's always Linux shit.
This that the Linux people just love, right? To tinker with the thingy that, like, recompile.
Nothing better than something broken.
drivers.
You came to do this thing, but God blessed you with a broken something, and now you can spend the rest of your time fixing that shit.
If I had a penny for every single time I heard the excuse like, "Hey, where's the research?" Oh, well, I started working on that, but in the process, Linux had an issue, so I started noticing these random errors which happened when I was running IDA, so I had to recompile the kernel, and then the driver started throwing an error, so I started investigating the issue, and I found a guy on Reddit who had the same issue as mine, and he posted a patch, and I took the patch, I improved the patch, and then recompiled it and put it in the, and then that actually caused a different issue to trigger. And for the second issue, there was another guy who had that in China, and he had the patch as well that I took, and I adapted, adjusted that, and now it took me about a week to do all that. But now my system is stable, and I can start working on that research.
At least now you have Codex, right? You can't say shit. You can't say anything about it.
But the question is, can Codex solve this drama in an hour as opposed to a week or not?
In my experience, yes, though I don't know this particular drama. I will say that
it's always the same drama.
Yeah, I'm not daily driving a Linux laptop. I don't know. I don't know if I have it in me. But with the one thing I do love about Linux servers and Docker containers and like anything that's like, just Linux sitting there is it's all files, it's all text, and the fucking model can literally turn it inside out in 45 minutes, whether you like it or not. Like it can change fucking everything in a minute. And you're like, okay, I can live with that. That is the computer of, as far as like technical processes and workflows and pipelines, like that's what I want.
I by the way, I think that the job of a sysadmin is over as we know it. Like in the future, no one will do system administration the old school, like we used to go and edit some configuration files, etc, whatever. It's gone. That ship has sailed. Like in the future, everyone will just install Codex and say, "Hey, configure this as a 2 NVIDIA DGX Spark setup that allows me to run DeepSeek Flash v4 with SGLang."
Are you reading my prompts? Is that
you know? Like, yeah, it's over.
I have a window here where Codex has just been SSH'd into. Dude, I haven't even connected a monitor to these Sparks. I don't know what the fucking interface looks like right now at all. I just have Codex fucking cooking and like trying models and like, excellent. Yeah, just let me know. Don't waste my time.
And it's good, right? It's a good feeling. Like,
yeah. No, Dad, no. We can all hang out here forever.
We're out of time, Costin.
I'm on
Close the show
vacation.
with some
Costin's on vacation. We're all on vacation, right?
Eternally on vacation. Shout-outs, by the way. Shout-outs to our good friend Matt Swish, who wrote on X that none of us will have jobs in 2 years, especially those of us that do this prompting. Like,
shout
take
out to
care
Matt
of my
Swish.
job.
Always
Let me relax. Always.
Honestly, at this point, fuck it. Why not?
I just want to call attention to one small thing. We had Microsoft Patch Tuesday. Since the last time we spoke, we got 400 plus new CVEs for Microsoft, in addition to 500 plus last month. So it's like the patch barrage is here. And I wanted to call attention to, you remember we talked on the podcast 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago around like, oh, Microsoft must be throwing their own M- thing at their products, and a lot of it is internally discovered. So it must, like we were excited to see Microsoft finding all these things. One of our listeners, Mark Piper, of New Zealand, actually put together an app that looks at what was reported by external researchers versus what was found internally by Microsoft based on their own acknowledgements. And of the 442 that was patched this month, 332 were reported by external folks. So there is no clear, here's Microsoft doing it. And that's for August. And for July, when we ran the numbers again, it was 90% externally reported and 10% found internally by Microsoft.
Fancy that.
So there's shout out. Yeah, shout out big time to Mark Piper who running these. The listeners doing the real work for us. But it shows. I mean, it shows that there's the barrage of patching is here. The priority around prioritizing which ones you apply first and which one you apply next becomes more and more important. And one other point I want to make that flagged into my brain is, as much as the vulnerability numbers are climbing to astronomical levels, thousands and thousands of patches every week from every vendor, the CISA KEV catalog, the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog that they continue to maintain, and they continue to drip out advisories on new additions to it. Those have not gone up exponentially. They're just like they're dripping out 2 or 3 in a week, 1 or 2 a week. So the numbers against what is actually being exploited and what's actually being dumped out as patches are like, there's a big giant mismatch there. So just something to think about as people figure out. Could it
be they just don't know what is getting exploited? Like you only see, the tip of the iceberg. Maybe like for every single case, as Juan was saying, everyone's just exploiting a 0-day or something they need for access. And overall, you just don't see what gets exploited anymore.
No, you guys, like maybe consolidating all of security into the same vendors that are providing all of the tools is maybe not like the best idea. Maybe that creates this sort of misaligned incentives where apparently 90% of these vulnerabilities tokens are being paid for by other companies, and then you're just begging Microsoft to please patch the thing. What a wonderful place to be, and they don't have the time nor the inclination. They just do whatever is easy for them. Like, remember when we used to have a conversation about whether it was okay or a good idea for Microsoft to be a security vendor, and like, oh, well, yeah, it's just anti-competitive for you people to talk about how they shouldn't. It's like, yeah, no, incentives matter. And they have no fucking incentive here other than to just skate.
Close the show with some shout-outs, please.
Oh, Ryan's internet's being shitty. I'm sure he's trying to get us to quit, which is funny.
Very cool thing was this website that the Jipu AI guys set up, where they keep track of all the CVEs they discover. So they have like this ledger where they just publish on every single CVE that their model discover. I think it would be awesome, if there was a similar effort from Anthropic, from OpenAI, where you just keep track of all the CVEs their model found, got patched and so on. It can be like hundreds, thousands, but it gets you an idea of what is being patched, what is being discovered, by whom, when, what is it, what does it mean, and so on.
How much of that is them being able to work with these unrestricted models at speed? Because what I'm realizing is just like how much of this is available to me because I don't have to deal with the guardrails. And like it is just a fact of life now, right? Like I grab this phone, I go, hey, this piece of shit is hiding something from me. The only way I can work with it is to essentially get an exploit at least, right? Like, and this phenomenal model can look at it and just be like, oh, well, here's 4 known CVEs, but fuck all of those. We're going to write our own. And within an hour, like, what was it? I want to say 8 hours worth of prodding. It's like, oh, I've got a local exploit. And then, 8 hours later, it's pulled all these different regions and things that are being hidden away from us. You go, fucking great. I'm not here for the VR of it. I don't give a fuck about the exploit at all. But it is the thing I needed to get through to the research I actually wanted to do, which is what is being hidden on this phone that isn't in the public firmware, that isn't available to users, and that's being piped around to a bunch of other unsuspecting people that are buying these things. And that's the beauty of this situation. Is I'm not saying that there's nothing interesting in VR. It's a fascinating space, but it's not my space. It's not the one I want to figure out, right? So to get back to the point, how much of that is we have access to, Daybreak Red and we can use the cyber model, and so can the Chinese essentially by just using their models which don't have these fucking problems for no reason, and everyone else is faffing around with like Fable 5, right?
And hitting the guardrails.
Yeah.
But also I think what is fascinating is what this enables, not necessarily on the offensive side, but seeing like, as you are saying also, you're just trying to investigate, research this phone, maybe even reflash it with the different operating systems. And I saw people reflashing Fortinet routers with Linux and OpenWRT. And actually turning that into an usable operating system, which I think is absolutely fascinating, giving like a new life to old hardware,
That's what we've been saying. We've been saying that on this podcast this whole fucking time. Just what we need is for people to make new OSs for these fucking garbage appliances. And now it's doable. It is manageable. I hope that that's the way forward. Ryan, close us out with some shout-outs.
That's a great way to end the show. That's the way forward. That's a great way to end the show. That's our show for this week, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you again next week.
Take care.
Peace.